When you're experiencing depression, it can feel like you're in a never-ending cycle of despair and hopelessness. And this is largely fueled by something known as the cognitive triad, which is a set of negative beliefs that people often hold about themselves, the world, and the future. And in a couple of previous videos, I've talked about ways in which depression can convince you of the first two parts of the triad, that you're not good enough and that the world is a harsh, unforgiving place. So in today's video, we're going to focus on the third part of the triad, which is negative beliefs about the future. And it's really common in depression to feel like there's no hope and that there's no point in trying because things will never get better. But if you see the future as completely bleak, filled with failure and disappointment, it becomes really difficult to find any motivation to set goals or even try to get out of the depression. And this is exactly what depression wants. So by recognizing and challenging some of these negative beliefs about the future, you can begin to start seeing the possibility of a future that's a lot more hopeful than you can see right now. So the first negative belief that I want to talk about is the belief that things will never get better. This belief often occurs when people feel that their current pain, their current difficulties or challenges are going to continue indefinitely or get worse over time. This belief can result from past experiences of feeling stuck or hopeless or having had repeated setbacks. And so when someone holds the belief that nothing's going to get better, it perpetuates a sense of helplessness, which results in a person withdrawing from things that they could do or could potentially do that could make them feel better, which then just leads into one of those negative depression spirals that are so common. And so what happens is that this belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, where the person stops trying to make things better because they believe that things will never get better. So if you recognize that you hold the assumption that things will never get better, how can you break out of this thought pattern? Well, the first thing to do is to think about times in the past when things did improve. Situations in which you felt helpless, but then there was something positive that happened. By practicing thinking about evidence from the past, this can help you break the habit of assuming that negative events that are happening in this moment will always define the future. The other thing you can do is to challenge this idea that the future is fixed and unchangeable. Think about other possible outcomes, other scenarios in which things could potentially improve. Now, although it may feel like wishful thinking, what this does is it gets you to consider other possibilities than just the bad things happening, which can then open the door for the potential of hope. The next assumption is the belief that I'll always feel this way. The idea is when you're experiencing overwhelming emotions like depression, it can seem as if that despair and sadness will never go away. And this belief relates to the assumptions that emotions are fixed and unchanging. The way I feel now is the way I'll always feel. And if you believe that your emotional pain is permanent, this is going to sap any motivation or desire to do anything that could potentially help you feel better, like socializing or getting exercise or engaging in activities that you used to enjoy. So if you catch yourself thinking that I'll always feel this way, what you want to do is to remind yourself that emotions are inherently transient. And what that means is that no emotion is ever permanent, and that moods and how a person feels can fluctuate, even though it may not feel like it. You won't always feel this way, and that's an important thing to remind yourself of, recognizing that you've probably had lots of experiences in your life where you felt different emotions. Another depression-promoting belief about the future is the notion that life is unbearable when it doesn't go the way I want it to be. And the idea behind this is that there's some sort of perfect, idealized version of life that I'm chasing, and once I reach it, everything will be fine. Once I get that job promotion, once I'm in that long-term relationship, once I buy a house, once I lose those 15 pounds, then I'll finally be able to be happy. Now, while it's true that achieving goals in life can bring a sense of relief and satisfaction, that's rarely ever the end goal. Once you accomplish certain goals, it's natural to want to achieve new goals. So by holding on to this belief that it's unbearable when things aren't going my way, you end up constantly chasing an illusion of an idealized perfect life, void of problems, that simply doesn't exist. Even if I manage to achieve all of the goals that I want and solve all of the problems in my life now, new goals and new problems will inevitably arise. I'm never going to feel fully satisfied because at the core of this belief, what I'm telling myself is that everything in my life has to be perfect in order for me to feel content and happy. But life is full of ups and downs, and this assumption promotes the unrealistic belief that life can somehow be all ups, which just simply isn't true. So the idea is to accept and to expect that life is going to come with all sorts of challenges, setbacks, and disappointments. And in doing so, you accept that there's no such thing as an imagined perfect version of life that you have to achieve in order to be happy. In other words, you can be content even when everything isn't perfect. The next belief is that I have the power to change other people if I simply care enough. So if I care enough about them or I love them enough, then they will become the person that I want them to be in the future. If I provide a secure enough relationship or explain things in just the right way, they'll get their life together and make the big changes they need. This assumption is rooted in the romanticized idea of love conquers all. If I hold this belief, I essentially believe that my influence is enough to help the other person succeed at whatever they need to improve, whether it's giving up drinking, striving for a better career, saving money, learning to manage their temper. And what usually underlies this belief is a deep sense of care and desire for the other person to have a better life. The challenge is, if I'm putting more effort into their life than they are, it's likely not going to work. You can't work harder at someone else's life than they do. And if you do find yourself trying to work harder at someone else's life than they are, what usually results is that you end up feeling resentful. You've invested all of this energy. You're trying to solve their problems, but the other person hasn't changed. And the result is you feel disappointment, sadness, and guilt because you believe that you had the power to change them. So the key is to remember that you only have control over your behavior, not the behavior of someone else, and that you can't work harder at someone else's life than they do. And finally, I want to talk about the assumption that there's no point in trying, which is a belief that stems from feelings of futility and helplessness. This assumption is closely associated with something called learned helplessness, where a person feels powerless to change their circumstances and as a result stops attempting anything to improve their situation. This belief can be incredibly paralyzing. If I think that my actions won't lead to any meaningful change, why would I bother? And if I feel that there's nothing I can do that's going to make a difference, that's going to have a negative effect on my self-esteem, which reinforces beliefs that I'm incapable of achieving my goals or that outside forces are always going to prevent me from succeeding in life. So what ends up happening is I don't put much effort into my activities, which results in negative outcomes, which further reinforces the belief that trying is pointless. It's another one of those negative depression cycles. So if you catch yourself assuming that there's no point in trying, what you want to do is to reframe failures as opportunities to learn, rather than proof that you're incapable of succeeding. And what this reframing does is that it helps promote a sense of resilience and being able to bounce back from setbacks rather than just seeing them as failures. It can also be helpful to focus on the process and the effort instead of just the results. The idea is that ultimate outcomes may be unpredictable because they're influenced by the world around us. But what you do have control over is the effort that you put into it. I may not be able to guarantee that I'm going to get the job, but what I can do is to prepare myself to do the best that I can do in the job interview. And so the idea is to recognize the value in the process regardless of what the final result was. And the last thing to do is to celebrate small wins. Recognizing and appreciating little achievements can help counteract the belief that there's no point in trying and that things will never work out. And this can reinforce the idea that putting effort into something can lead to positive results. You see, the thing is, none of us owns a crystal ball. We're terrible at predicting the future, but that's exactly what depression wants us to try to do. It wants us to see the future as bleak and hopeless, filled with failure and despair, which just leads to a person giving up because they see no value in trying. But if you can begin to recognize that the depression predictions of the future are not necessarily true, it can start to foster a sense of hopefulness. And if you want to learn more about how negative predictions about the future can lead to worry and anxiety, I encourage you to check out this video. So that's all for today's video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.